Hello, friends. So good to be with you today. Um, Today's podcast, I really want to cover some areas of specifically dealing with identity, with purpose. I've just encountered so many people that have just kind of lost their way and they didn't know what to do. I was looking at a uh, little news clip the other day concerning what is called the doldrums. A lot of people, you know the word, but don't exactly know what that means. Well, down near the equator, what happens? There is a time back during the equator. Of course, this was a time when the ships just simply depended on wind. They weren't propelled by engines. They weren't propelled by hardly anything except just wind. And down near that equator, there would be a time when there would be what they would call the doldrum, where it appeared that the wind just stopped, and it could stop for a matter of minutes, an hour, a matter of hours, or sometimes even days or weeks. People would literally die uh, in the doldrums. That they would be out there just die on the ship. There was and so they kind of termed that a lot of times as ghost ships because everybody was dead. Well, what happened? I mean, what would cause the doldrum? Well, a lot of people just think that the wind stops, but it doesn't stop. Actually, what happens is the wind goes up, straight up, and so um, as a result, people are just victimized by what happens with the wind. And I've heard people say when their life seemed like it got stuck, it was like I'm in the doldrums. I don't know how to get out. All I can do is just sit here in it. I mean, have you ever felt like that? I certainly have, to where it was just god awful. Oh my Lord. You're just thinking, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I'm in the doldrums. And if somebody doesn't save you, or if somehow that event doesn't stop, you get stuck there. And there's a lot of people today that are stuck. They're stuck in their life, they're stuck in their purpose. And it's almost like then they don't know who they are anymore. I've just seen people that are running in circles. They're striving. They're searching. They're restless. It's almost like they don't know what to do. They don't know where they fit anymore, because you know the difference. I mean, people who know who they are, they're the ones that's moving forward with achievement. Those that don't, well, they just tend to step out of their boundaries. They cross lines. They become abusive, grasping for some sense of identity. And so many people are in that condition because of the things that they've been through. Some of the things have been by their own hands. Something happened to them, and it caused them, to go off the rail. Maybe it was through drugs, through alcohol, whatever. But sometimes it was by no fault of their own, which could be the case with some of you. Real quickly, I just want to tell you two instances. One is the one we know as Jabez. You remember reading about the prayer of Jabez? Well, what Jabez said was, he said, "Expand my borders. I'm in trouble. I'm in the doldrums, so to speak." And Jabez was called Jabez, which means sorrow bringer. Sorrow bringer. What a name to tag on somebody. But it was because his mother bore him in pain. And she turned that pain from her to him and labeled him with that. He was labeled. Think about that. Uh, Hard to get a date when your name is sorrow bringer. I mean, that's really the truth, isn't it? And what he did is he prayed. He said, "God, enlarge my borders. Help me get out of this box that I'm in." And another Old Testament story when it happened concerning Benjamin, which was the son of Jacob. Whenever his mother Rachel, she died in childbirth, and in dying, she knew she was dying, and she called him Benoni, which meant the son of my sorrow. Of course, Jacob, he wasn't having any of that. He stepped up and said, "No, that's not his name. His name will be Benjamin." Now, the reason I bring those up is because sometimes we things that happen in our life happen by no fault of our own, just a horrible event that took place. And so they've taken, you didn't cause the crash. You were just simply victimized by it. And so what today is, I want to talk to you about going from that broken state to an unbroken state. I want to help you get your life back. And so today I have a special guest with me, and I'm very excited about this. Let me just bring her on. This is Theresa Pore. And Theresa, she is the founder of Unbreakable Enterprises. She's an author. She's a public speaker. She's very involved in solving the complexities of life that people go through. She's a business coach. She's a life coach. And one of the projects that she's doing now is called Unbreakable. And I think she's doing Unbreakable Men right now. We'll get into that in a minute, which will be followed by Unbreakable Women, Unbreakable Families, Unbreakable Children. The list goes on, but it's amazing insight and wisdom. And so I want to just say, Theresa, welcome. I'm so glad that you came on with me.
Yay. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This is really good. I'd like to just hear what inspired you to start Unbreakable and what maybe personal experiences that shaped your vision for this movement. I mean, this has the potential to be an incredible movement. So let's just start with this, if you would not mind. I'd like you to just tell me a little bit about yourself and how this vision was birthed in you, kind of what happened and where it's going.
Sure.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I love how you talked about the doldrums, because I wouldn't quite call my situation a doldrum. I actually call it the elephant's graveyard, where I found myself in a place that I literally felt I had a vision, actually. God gave me a vision of an elephant's graveyard, and it was a metaphorical place of being so far away from purpose that I felt like I was obsolete. I no longer had value, and I wasn't using my gifts. And that was at a place that I was in life. And so I think that was the real start to this journey. But then it took a whole lot of turns. And I had that graveyard experience when I was working in a career. It was 15 years into my banking career. And I realized I wasn't in the place that I was supposed to be any longer, if that makes sense. I was,
but that happens in people, doesn't it? I mean, they come to the end of a season, the end of a chapter, so to speak. That's where you were?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that made it hard for me to see that chapter was ending is because I was so grateful for that chapter. I was so grateful to have been elevated into the banking industry, elevated to a place that I had impact and I was making great money and had a great career, that it was hard for me to see that the time had shifted and I was supposed to take those skills, those gifts, and those talents that God had given me and put them to work somewhere else. And so literally God showed me a vision of a graveyard. And that was a pretty scary vision, and I think of the doldrums, that's probably a pretty scary place for people.
Right.
And sometimes it takes something that's that vivid to just shake you up enough to where you can get curious. And that's where it started for me, was the curiosity.
Was it hard to make that transition? Transitions, I think, is where so many people stall up. And you know what's so crazy is I've had ideas before that people, when it was time to transition, it's always coupled with risk. It's always coupled with, if I quit this, what am I going to do? And that's a scary time. And so as a result, many times I think people stay in something that is past its season, and it's miserable. And then it comes to a place that says, I hate my job. I hate what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think you talked a little bit about identity and purpose. And I think what made that transition hard for me was that I had a false sense of identity around who I was because of the elevated position that I had. I placed my identity in the achievement of a role, the achievement of, a level in the community, right? Just all of these different hats that I had picked up, that's what made it a challenge. And I will say that the Lord spoke to me and said, your title doesn't define you, your calling does.
Yeah.
And that was a big eye opener. I don't usually talk about that a whole lot, but it's so important because I think that's what made the transition so long and laborious, is because I was tied to a position of authority, maybe because I didn't feel like I really deserved it.
And of course, the question that I have there is, do you think that with most people, when they get lost, it's because their identity is found in what they do rather than who they are? Would you say that was the case?
I think in a lot of people that we work with, family members that I have, people that we, come in contact with on a daily basis, we put our identity in outward
Yeah.
things, in titles and positions and places.
They lose the title and they have a nervous breakdown.
Well, and that's the truth. So many people, particularly a lot of men that we work with, that's a big struggle for them, especially in career changes. If they've lost their job, they've lost their sense of purpose.
Right.
And that's not true, but that's where they placed all their value on their identity. And that becomes a very dangerous place. You go into depression and, very downward spirals and cycles. So yes, I believe that identity is such a big piece of it. And that's why it's so important to spend some time looking inward and figuring out, who are you?
Would you mind going back and just kind of telling the story? You were at the bank, how you came to the realization, and I say at the bank almost as though that was your life, basically.
Right.
That was an entire career. 15 years, that's a long time. And how did you come to the realization? What did you do? How did you make that transition, and how did you make that choice?
Well, so honestly, I feel like I was starting to run into roadblocks at the job, right? The reality was kicking in that I was elevated to a great role and it was wonderful for me, but I didn't also have a lot of the experience needed to excel further in the role. So I kept hitting into some roadblocks there. And when I had that elephant's graveyard vision, I was actually on the phone with my boss. Like, talk about God timing. They say he has a sense of humor. My boss called me on the phone and said, "Theresa, how is it going in Taylor?" And then boom, vision in my head. And before I could even filter it, it fell out of my mouth. I feel like I'm in an elephant's graveyard.
Wow.
And so there was no let me process this. It literally went from here to here. And I don't let that happen too often. It's dangerous. But I ended up realizing I needed to investigate that. I feel like a lot of times we pass thoughts way too quickly. Some things, maybe God's trying to communicate with us, maybe a situation is trying to tell us something, but we get so busy or so wrapped up in things that we just dismiss those warnings or those signs, and we just file it away and pretend it didn't matter. But that weekend after that phone call, I went home and I really prayed and meditated and started Googling, what does an elephant's graveyard mean? And it became just a realization to me that I needed to figure it out. And so I started having conversations with my boss and started looking for opportunities where maybe I could use and the reason I felt that way, I think, is because I knew in me, even from being a kid, when I was in high school, I had inspirational messages on my locker. I didn't put pictures of boys, which is what most girls did, in their lockers. I had inspirational messages. In my core, I was always the one to inspire. And I've just always believed in that. And when I was at the bank, one of the things is I wasn't allowed to be that way. I had to be micromanagement, direct, all of those things. And so there was a disconnect that was happening there. And that's what I saw as I saw that elephant's graveyard. So I started looking for roles and doing some different things. And ultimately, it led to an opportunity for a position at the bank that I'd spent 6 months preparing for. But on my way to that interview, I prayed and said, "God, if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, you've already prepared me. You've already got the door open. Make it clear. But if it's not, close the door and make it clear, because I don't want to spend any more time wandering off in the wrong direction." And he answered that prayer. It was so obvious by the spin of that interview, and I could talk forever on that, and I won't, but he made it very clear. And that allowed me to see, okay, I need to make a transition. He's kind of helping guide this transition. And it was just a really hard and wonderful confirmation that it was time to look for something different.
Let me
And I
let me
didn't
ask
have
you, let me ask you a question here. Do you think as people are, because you're in the process of bringing lives together, you call it unbreakable, but the fact is sometimes they're just lost or not sure. In the times of transition, do you think that one of the greatest signs that it's time to make a transition is that you feel displaced, that you feel something's missing, I'm dissatisfied, or is that just something that's in people that maybe they're just not focusing themselves? Because it actually could be both. But it sounds like with you that there was just a place that you were just saying it was like all of the, in a bird in the nest scenario, it would be like the all the soft places were being pulled out of the nest until you were just dissatisfied. It wasn't quenching the thirst, so to speak. Do you think that's a sign of where people are when it's time for them to go?
Yeah, I think we all will feel things different, but I felt definitely for sure that I wasn't content. I wasn't growing. I wasn't using your gift. And I think we all know we have an idea of what our gifts are, whether our gifts are
Right.
teaching, inspiring, encouraging. We also know about the gifts that we wish we were.
Right.
And I think that's a big piece of it too. When you find yourself, reaching to be something that maybe isn't in line with who you are, to try to fill a hat or to make something fit you better, and it doesn't work. And so
Right.
for me, I think at that point in time, it was just feeling like I'm not making traction. I'm not happy. That was a big thing. I wasn't happy. And I was blaming outside situations on being unhappy. I was blaming the astronomical goals. I was blaming the people around me and their performance. And really, it had nothing to do with them. I was in the wrong space, in the wrong place. And honestly, after all the growth I've had, if I were to go back there, I'd probably have been a much better employee today because I know who I am. Like, I feel bad,
Yeah.
thinking, man, I could have been so much better. But I needed that transition and I needed that time and the place to grow and develop. And so for a lot of people, I think, whether it's just like me, that I held on to something for so long because I felt like I didn't really deserve it to begin with. And I was so grateful for it. Or maybe we hold on to things out of, pride. Like, I just can't let it go. I don't know what to do. Or maybe we stay in situations because of fear. But either way, I feel like God allows us to grow in one place until it's time to go to the next stage. And if we're not willing, many times he'll let us sit there and be miserable. He'll let us stay.
Yeah, well, that's true. I've seen people spend their entire lifetime moving on. When you went then to this meeting, then it basically the door was closed. Is that
Mhm.
correct? I
It
mean,
was so close.
that is a point, and I'm belaboring this. I mean, I want to get on to unbreakable, unbroken,
Unbreakable.
unbreakable. I want to get to that, but I really feel like I need to take just a moment to spend here, because there are times when it's time for you to move on, to know how you feel, but then sometimes the door closes on you. Now, I had an experience a number of years ago. Well, it's been quite a while now, that there was a group that I wanted to be involved in. I really did. I mean, they were they were doing some amazing things, and I thought, I want to be a part of that. It was such a dream that I had, and I'm just telling you something. The door just slammed shut. I got my feelings hurt. I mean, it was terrible. And, but you just do it because you really feel a sense of rejection. You think, well, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Maybe I'm not this and I'm not that, and people allow those thoughts. But had I gone through that door, I would not be where I'm at today.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think people, they miss they perceive that as rejection, as failure, as missed opportunity, when all the time it was God closing the door because of the assignment and the purpose that he had for them in the future.
Right.
And it's so easy because I know also, I mean, I know a little bit about you, obviously, that you have gone through a couple of times when it was like a door slammed on you here or closed on you there. And of course you handled it with such grace, but quite frankly, had those doors not closed on you, geez, we would not be having this conversation, and you would not be doing Unbreakable. I
Right.
do know that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when the door closed on you there, what was your reaction at that time? Where did you go from there?
Well, the first thing I did is I went to my car and cried like a baby for about 45 minutes. You
Okay,
know,
I
but
got that.
um, it was very interesting, God's timing. This interview that I went on was literally the day before we were going to see my oldest graduate from boot camp, and then we were going to Disney, and so we had all this stuff happening in our life at that time. We had also just come off of Royal's accident that caused two major surgeries in him. So there was a
Yeah,
lot happening in our life that also probably made me question where I was at in my life and what is the work I'm doing really what I was created for. So there was a lot of things happening. But after that door closed, literally the next weekend we're in Virginia, we're watching a Marine boot camp, which was amazing. We
yeah.
went to Disney, which was also amazing. And then I come back home and my friend sends me this message and says, Theresa, don't forget, we're having a Mary Kay party tomorrow and you and Portia are supposed to be there. And I'm like, Portia doesn't like Mary Kay. But it was so interesting how, that door
Yeah.
closed and then a new one was open, one that I probably in fact, I know I was a snob to for many years. Through my banking career, I had women come up to me all the time wanting me to sell Mary Kay and do different things. And I always said no. Like, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I loved serving people the way I did. I didn't have time to do anything else. But it was so interesting, that window of opportunity. It was right before I had to go back to the office and figure out my next steps from a door closing. God presented to me the Mary Kay opportunity. And that became like a bridge between the bank and where we're at today. And it was such a beautiful bridge, many reasons, but it taught me a lot of things. And one of the things that it gave me was belief and confidence that I could be an entrepreneur. I could have a support system and a team and do things. And by golly, there is opportunity to inspire people and do great things.
Isn't that amazing though? And I think we underestimate the places that we've been, how one builds upon another. The experiences you had with Mary Kay, the experiences you had with the bank, all of those things giving you real life experience,
Mhm.
wisdom, understanding of how the system works, how business operates, to know how all of those things come together to enable you to do what you're doing today.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's
So
so fun
important.
to look back and say, I could just see God saying, here you go. Here you go. And looking at it, you're like, how does that even measure up? Like, how do
Wow.
those pieces connect? But he knows. And it's so cool to look back and see it. But that became the next phase. And then after, building some confidence and really digging in and then of course losing some of my heart around the bank at that point. I
Right.
stayed with the bank for a year, really just lost my passion after God closed that door. I decided, okay, I can step out. Our fireplace business, our chimney business was growing. Royal needed support in that. So I thought, I'm managing two banks. Why couldn't I use these skills I learned in banking, these skills in Mary Kay to help develop our organization together and make it grow? And so that's what I ended up doing. I said goodbye to the bank after 16 years and kept Mary Kay going, and then went to work helping Royal build our organization of Top Hat for a couple of years. And then we hit another doldrum moment, however you say that.
Doldrum, yes.
Doldrum, yes. Yep.
And yeah,
Um,
you
that
you you began. I and please forgive me for not knowing the name exactly. I just remember when this happened. You began another organization that was called, what was it?
Oh, you're talking about Break the Silence?
Break the Silence.
Yeah.
It was right on the tip of my tongue. I was so close.
Yes. So close.
You just
So
needed
close.
to give me another 20 minutes to come up with that. Break the silence. That's a big deal. I know that that was on children or people that
Mhm.
had been abused. They had been basically hiding in secret, which is where most people are. They get hurt. I mean, I'm not. Some people will advertise it to the world, but for the most people, they would like to say, "I'm
Right.
okay. I'm going to live. Let's just sweep this under the rug and go on." And the wound is it's almost like they just put a band-aid over it, but it's never taken care of. So
Yeah.
you began that, and you had quite a bit of success with it.
We, you know, that second doldrum
Yes.
moment hit after being with our chimney company for a couple of years. And here's the bridge between those two. Let me just elaborate here for a minute. I found that I was hitting the same kind of walls that I was hitting at the bank. But now this was my own business. Like, what was the deal? I couldn't figure out why. Okay, I couldn't blame it on the bank, this huge corporate machine anymore, because I wasn't with them. It was me. It was my business now. And I was finding myself running into walls in relationships, running into walls in friendships, running into walls in both businesses. And so I decided at that stage in life, I needed to hire a life coach. I didn't even know what life coaching was. We had a business coach. We understood
Yeah.
about that. But the term life coach just seemed odd to me. It seemed kind of funny. Like, what are they going to do? Stand on the sidelines of life and go you? Like, what is that? You know? And so I didn't know what I was getting into. But I decided I needed to find out why I was hitting these walls. And I remember being in my prayer room at the house one day and saying, God, why can't I hear your voice?
Yeah.
Like, why am I stuck at this place again? Like, what's the problem? And the answer that he gave me was because you're listening to too many other voices.
Wow.
And that was profound. And it was true.
Yeah.
Because I was listening to my nationals voice saying, Theresa, if you would just do this. I was listening to my parents saying, just, dig into top. Like everybody telling me what I needed to do and where my potential lied instead of submitting it to the Lord and learning to look inward and learning to really discover who I am, not who other people saw me to be. And so I went on this journey, and here's what I want to point out about that journey is in that journey, I rediscovered Theresa Pore. And I celebrated who she was and decided to embrace every piece of her, which also meant I had to rediscover places of me that I buried. That were probably actually living in that elephant's graveyard. Pieces of me that I was covering up with shame, regret, all kinds of things. Pieces of my heritage and family that I was maybe ashamed of. All these things. And I had to pull them up to the surface and say, why do I feel this way? I had to rediscover a lot of things. And in that discovering process, I built a new confidence muscle in me that made me want to start sharing stories, to start, revealing things that had been suppressed, to give other people hope. In that journey, though, we went through a very tough situation in our family that led to us wanting to create the organization called Break the Silence, where we really wanted to give parents and children and communities an opportunity to talk about sexual violence against children so that they could have a voice. What I found in that, though, is that while it was a wonderful mission and it's still doing great things, sometimes we align ourselves with the wrong people that just aren't going the same place that you're going. And those people have their own vision, mission, and purpose, and it's beautiful. And
Great.
God gives us our own unique vision, mission, and purpose. And if we don't recognize that misalignment soon enough, you get voted off of a board that you created.
Yeah. But again, I think though that comes because obviously you left them breaking the silence. But that brings us right back to the point is to say sometimes a door closes.
Yes.
Because had that not closed, you would still be in that and maybe chafing back and forth by people who were trying to they had their own agenda.
Right.
But the door closed. And I think that I personally feel that was intentional. I think God was just saying maybe that was an additional building block for what you were doing. I mean, I think obviously the things early in your life, the bank situations, the Mary Kay thing, the breaking the silence, each of these were just, and the top hat, each of these were just building blocks on top of each other.
Absolutely.
But then once you left there, the next step, how long did it take you to go from breaking the silence, going to your car and crying?
Actually, I came to church and cried. um,
How long did it take you to get into Unbreakable?
It didn't take long. And that's the really cool thing. Like, I'm sitting here, even though I've played this in my head a million times and revisited all of the sequence, right? God is so good. Like, as soon as he closed the door at the bank, the Mary Kay door opened. As soon as, the break the silence door closed, the Unbreakable door opened. He's always right there waiting for us to walk through the new door and to say, hey, baby, I've got you. Like, I'm going to walk this journey with you.
Okay, let's run here then. What is Unbreakable, and where are you at, and what's the next step in Unbreakable?
Well, so to say what Unbreakable is it's a journey. That's really probably the best way to describe it. There was several moments in my transitioning, as we just talked about, where I had to walk through certain pillars. One pillar led to another and then to another. And one of the last things that happened was my mom passing away. And as my mom passed away, I came home from her funeral with a shirt that she used to wear all the time, as she was a lung cancer warrior. And that shirt was like Rosie the Riveter with her muscles up, and it said lung cancer survivor. And on the bottom of the shirt, it said Unbreakable. And this was in October of 2023. I remember being in my bathroom. I'd come home from the funeral. I was wearing her shirt, and I just started crying to the Lord. And I said, God, why did she have to break? And the answer that he gave me immediately in my spirit was that sometimes in life, there will be things that are feeling like they're crushing you, that are pulling at you, that are ripping you apart, and that are breaking you. But the truth is, until it's time to come home with the right foundation, you will remain unbreakable. Wow. And that was such a turning moment in my life. Within a couple of weeks, I felt the Holy Spirit say women's conference. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I loved sharing stories. I knew I loved getting women on a stage and giving them a platform to speak life and hope and love into others. And so I just called a couple of friends and said, hey, would you be willing to share your story? Like your unbreakable story, your unbreakable spirit story, and really talk about the day you took back your power. And because I felt like power has been stripped away from all of us. We give it away in our health. We give it away in our identity, our false identities. We give it away in so many areas. And when we intentionally take it back, that's discovering who you are. And so we had this women's conference, and it was beautiful. 2 weeks before the conference, you, sir, called me and said, what's next? What's next? What's coming after this? And so I thought, oh gosh, I've got to figure this out. Like, is it just a conference? Is that all I'm supposed to do, is one thing? And no, I went to prayer, and God reminded me of the word that he used when he spoke to me in the bathroom, which was with the right foundation. And so I started outlining the foundational pieces he took me through on my unbreakable journey. And that went from self-discovery all the way to purpose. And there were 7 pillars total, in between, from self-discovery to purpose.
Real quickly, tell me what those 7 pillars are.
Sure. So self-discovery, identity, same thing, to our mindset and mind shifting moments, to our beliefs, whether they're our beliefs or somebody else's beliefs. What do we believe? From that to our trauma and our defining moments, from that to our health, from that to community, and then community to purpose. Those are the 7 pillars. And so we decided, okay, that is our program. And we help people through the unbreakable life journey go through those 7 pillars of rediscovering who they are, all the places in between, to helping them discover their God-given purpose. And what we found is that not everybody, just like myself, are going to come up to somebody and say, hey, I feel broken. Can you help me? Right. So that's where
some of them don't know they're broken.
That's right. That's right.
They think it's normal.
But absolutely, or we think, or we think it's something outside of ourselves,
Right.
right? And my favorite quote from Carl Jung says, "Those who look outside dream. Maybe it's a nightmare, but they're dreaming. But those who look inside awaken."
Yeah.
Right? And so we
Isn't
walk
that
in.
good?
Yeah, so good. I will never forget that quote. Anyway, what we decided though is that we needed to meet people where they were at. Not everybody is going to look inward, just like Carl Jung said. Most of us are going to spend our time looking outward. So we decided, what are those outward places that they look? Well, for me, it was business. I was always thinking it was a careers problem, or it was my relationship problem, or it was my kids acting fools, right? So we decided that we were going to take Unbreakable to different areas where we could meet them where they're at. So we launched Unbreakable Business, and we've built a foundation to helping them with business. We
Mm,
launched
good.
Unbreakable Men, Unbreakable Women, and we are working on Unbreakable Families.
Yeah. Are you going to do Unbreakable Children?
We are.
Or did you just say that and I just didn't grasp that?
No, no, so right now what we have in place is Unbreakable Women and Men, Unbreakable Health. I work with my friend, my naturopath doctor, who literally transformed my health in a humongous way
Hmm.
and changed the way I look at health and the way that I nourish my body uniquely. So I feel like that's
Hmm.
super important to help people, especially when we talk about taking back your power. So
Right.
there's Unbreakable Life, Unbreakable Health, men and women, and then we are leaning into the marriages, the families, and the children.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I mean, it is a that is a that is a vision from God
Yes.
in this sense. It's so broad. It has so many legs to it.
Mhm.
So many areas that can touch. And it's not just confined to one little area. It's powerful. That is one of the that is one of the most incredible uh, uh, paths I think that you could possibly go. I think it truly is. I'd heard the statement years ago, but I think it is the fact, and I would like to just say to anyone listening, is the fact that God can turn your scars into
Yeah.
stars. God
Yes.
can take these situations that you're in. Please don't feel hopeless.
Mhm.
It's so sad that people just feel that they lose their way and they it's like they have difficulty recovering.
Right.
Um, I want to ask you this one question though. I've got this down. Um, what is one of your biggest challenges and how you overcome it? And what I mean by that is, what is your biggest mud on the windshield moment, and how did you push through that? As you look back through the years, if you could define it into one, and
Mm.
maybe what would that be?
You know, I I think the biggest aha moment where I saw maybe how you would say the mud on the windshield. God gave me a vision one time in my unbreakable journey when I was going through it. I was actually at a women's retreat and I was so hesitant to going to this event because I felt like I didn't really need to spend money or I didn't need to be away from my husband. I didn't feel worthy of getting away and digging in and working on me. But I'm so glad I went because at this event, I had this vision that I could literally see the wall that was separating me from everybody. As I mentioned to you earlier, I kept feeling like I was running into walls, right? I was running into walls in business, I was running into walls in relationships. And what I had realized is God showed me this wall, and it almost feels kind of matrixy, so bear with me for a minute. But it was like I could see through it, but like
Mhm.
I could almost touch through it, like I'm touching through a screen, and it was like jelly on one side, but solid on the other.
Mm.
So I felt like I had the illusion that I was reaching you, but there was something blocking me from you. And that vision, I had to pray about it and meditate on it. And what I realized was I was never going to be able to make the impact in the hearts and the lives of others around me until I put down that wall. And I was carrying it like a badge of honor, like something that I was so proud of, that I had built to protect me. And that was such a huge vision, because my heart's desire has always been to reach people and to lift them up. But God showed me through that vision, until I was willing to lay down that wall that I used for self-preservation. And I wasn't relying on his strength to protect me. I was relying on my own. I would never make the impact in the hearts of others.
Wow. Okay, I got another question for you.
Yeah.
And the reason is because of the experiences that you've had. If you could sit down with your younger self for 1 hour, you could go back to you were a teenage kid, whatever the case is, you were making decisions. What would you say if you had 1 hour?
Well, I have done that. I've gone back in my heart and in my mind and had that conversation with my younger self. And I said, I see you and I love you. And people need to hear the things that you think you need to protect. I think the problem that I would face, and a lot of people face, is that when we're in our formative years, when we're young, our vision is so narrow. Like, we've only got what we've been allowed to see up until that place in life. And so that becomes our entire world.
The whole world.
And we protect it and we preserve it and we try to hide it or whatever. And so many times we find ourselves stuck in traumatic situations that are there. And I think when you can go back and you can really just, even in your heart, just say to your younger self, I see you and it's okay. Just a relief that can come, like a forgiveness, and even just the empowerment that it was okay. You did the best you had with the vision that you had with where you were at. And we're so much stronger now. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah, I've thought about that myself. I thought, what would I, if I could go back as a young man, what would I say to myself? And that's really a big question. But I think especially for some people is to say just that. It's going to be okay. And you're going to make it, because you had, I don't want to say turbulent, but if I understand a little bit, is the fact that kind of a bumpy start, just getting moved on with your life, your family, and sometimes people just feel like, I'm stuck here and I don't know what to do, and to have that word, it's going to be okay. Well, let me ask you something. Obviously, Unbreakable is not the closing chapter for your life, and who knows, that may expand into things. I mean, I truly foresee this being something that could reach around the world and truly leave an impact, a working impact in people's lives. I think it's a fabulous thing. But let's go to the end of your days. What's the one thing that you want people to remember about you? What all is said, what all is done? What would you like for that to be?
I think if I could leave one imprint in the hearts of others, it was that because of Theresa Pore, because of the work that we did, they were seen.
Yeah. Okay, well, you make that awfully simple. All right, I want to close this off. What's next? What's next for Unbreakable? What do you foresee happening? And once we get to that particular point, I'd like to ask the question is how can people become involved?
Sure.
How can people connect?
Well, thank you. The immediate next is we have a couple of conferences coming up. We have a women's conference coming up on May 15th in Elgin, Texas. We have an Unbreakable Business Conference, which I'm super excited about, because then I get to share all the stories about the mistakes I made in business and how I'll help other people avoid some of those. That's also in May. That's May 1st. So those are our immediate things that are coming up. And how can people get involved? Well, number one is if you find yourself hitting a wall If you find yourself wondering, what does God have for me? I feel stuck. I feel like I've got the imposter syndrome going on in my life, or I don't really know who I am and nothing seems to fit. Reach out to us. We would love to help you on that journey. And
Yep.
maybe you're somebody that you've like, I've got this figured out and I love the idea of Unbreakable. The only way we can take it to the world, as you say, sir, is by other people locking arms with us. So if you're a life coach, if you're somebody who wants to make a difference in the world and you feel like you need a place to contribute and get on board, that's another thing that we're looking for is people that can help us complete this very important work that God placed in our hands.
Now, you also are a life coach, so people can contact you for that. They can contact you for the business,
Yes.
their personal life. You're also doing a thing on health,
Marriage,
the whole thing. Yes,
the whole thing.
that's so exciting.
It's exciting.
That
It's
is so cool. I'm truly I'm amazed by it. I think it's absolutely wonderful. Theresa, thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise, your wonderful life. Once again, could you give contact information? How can
Yes.
people reach you?
Absolutely. So definitely on social media, Theresa Pore. The email or
Pore.
Pore.
Okay, we got that on the screen.
Yes, on our website, unbreakablewomen'sconference.com. Business is unbreakable-business.com. And my website is theresapore.com. So I would love, love, love to stay connected. Thank you. Thank you
All
for
right.
bringing me on.
Thank you very much. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye. All right. What a great work she's doing. That is fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. I encourage you to reach beyond your boundaries. That God has you are so much more than you realize. You are. I know you have circumstances that may hinder you, but those are the places God works best. He works with impossibilities. You may feel like there's no way possible. Well, that's where God shines. And I'm telling you, He has a plan for your life. He really does. And I just want to encourage you to pull yourself together. You may need a life coach. I don't care who you are. Even Michael Jordan had a coach. And I don't care who you are. You need someone that speaks into your life. I remember one time I was playing golf. As a matter of fact, I think I even talked about this in a podcast. And I'd been playing golf for a while, but I got off, and everything I hit, I was shanking it. I was off slicing the daylights out of that. It wasn't a fade; it was a slice, and I couldn't stop. Very frustrating. I'm telling you, it's so frustrating. And I couldn't tell what I was doing, which is real picture of people's lives. You can't always tell what you're doing. And finally, I broke down out of just sheer desperation. I went to a coach, and he said, "Well, let me look at your swing," which is always a very vulnerable thing that you got to do in your life whenever you're going to go to a coach. Is you're going to have to let them look at you. And he looked at me a couple of swings, and he said, "Well, here's what you're doing wrong." Oh my God! And for the life of me, I said, "No, I'm not." I couldn't believe I even said that, but I said, "No, I'm not," because I couldn't see that. And he said, "No, you." I mean, he had this kind of look on his face because this was a pro. He had been working with a lot of professional golfers, and he said, "No, this is what you're doing." He even had somebody else come over. Come here, tell him this is what he's doing. And I couldn't see it, and it was a real life lesson to me. Is the fact that sometimes we can't see what we're doing. We just know that we're always in trouble. We just know that no matter what swing we have, I had out of habit grooved a swing, which is a golf term. You groove it to where you just do it by muscle memory. You don't even realize you're doing it. And a lot of people, that's what's happening to their life. They're struggling because they've grooved this swing that's produced. Because let me just tell you something, the ball doesn't care. People say, "Well, I need to get new clubs." The club doesn't care. It just doesn't care. It does what you tell it to do. And so the problem is always with you. Did you hook it? Did you shank it? Did you slice it? Did you hit it fat? What did you do? That was something you did. And you don't even realize many times you've done it, because a swing literally takes just a millisecond. And so sometimes you need someone to look at your swing. And I would encourage you to contact Theresa, or maybe someone in your area. Maybe you're not in the area where you can, but I encourage you to get someone to look at your swing. Are you having problems with your marriage? Get someone to look at you. Problems with your business, problems with your time. Are you always late? Are you always making excuses? And because making excuses, that's really kind of a sign, isn't it? The fact of saying something's wrong. I'm out in the trees. And you need to evaluate yourself and be honest with yourself. I think that's part of the evaluation. It's the fact that you got to be honest with yourself. And sometimes that hurts, but your life is too important. The things you will never get back, is your time. And unfortunately, many of the habits that we've developed consume us. It consumes our time. It consumes what we can't get back. And you can't afford to waste the rest of your life in the trees. Life is supposed to be fun. The golf is a wonderful game if you stay in the fairway. Well, it just is. And it's a real life, it's just a real life lesson. So I encourage you to find a coach, someone that can talk to you, someone that can maybe you can be transparent with, and they can be transparent with you. And always take constructive criticism. That was one thing I learned when I first started. Always be open to constructive criticism, or you'll never grow. Not destructive. You know what destructive criticism is. They're just being punks towards you. But constructive criticism exposes the things that maybe you don't want to hear, but they're the very things that cause you to trip and be broken. And our goal is to help you be unbroken. Our goal is to help take you to the next level. All right. I so much have appreciated you joining with me today. I hope this coming to you today really has helped you come to the next level in life, because that's what God has for you. So I want to just say to you today, life is good. Life is yours. God wants you to experience it to its fullest. So go for it.